Good evening. This is the City Council meeting of Monday, April 19, 2021. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Albertson,
Here.
Bueller,
Here.
Hoyer,
Here.
Colleen,
Here.
Lallam, absent, Manti,
Here.
Rademski,
Here.
Roby,
Here.
Philhauer,
Here.
Y.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda, and I have some changes to make. First, we'll delete item L. Just take that off. And then items H, I, and K, I'll move to the regular agenda after item O. And that's it. Got a motion by Vilhauer and a second by Y. Any discussion?
I'll take the blame for moving H, I, and K. I don't trust, it's not that I don't trust what the staff has done, the recommendation that's coming forth. It's just there are large dollar amounts involved, and I guess I would like to have us have a chance to individually discuss the items and take a vote on them.
That's perfectly fine, Councilman Vilhauer. No problem. Anyone else? Councilman Rademski?
I also noticed on the agenda that our resolution due to the coronavirus is not on here.
Right, we'll discuss that. I made a note to just bring it up verbally at the end of the meeting. Thank you, though. Help me remember. Anyone else? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is public comments. This is the time reserved for anyone who would like to make a public comment to step forward and do so. We do have a sign-up sheet for in-person comments and a policy for all. If anyone wishes to speak, please come forward or say permission to speak if you're online. See no one, we'll move on to approval of the agenda. I have a motion by Holeen and a second by Bueller. Any discussion? Yes, Councilman Y.
I would recuse myself for A and B.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Councilman Roby.
I will also be recusing myself from items A and B.
A and B. Okay. Anyone else? Where's Councilman Hoyer?
He's online.
Oh. Yes, he is. He's got his hand up. Councilman Hoyer.
Madam Mayor, I'll be doing the same.
Okay, I
Recuse
thought you
myself
might
from the
be.
same items.
Thank you. So we have 3 recusals. Anyone else? Okay. With that, all those in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed
Aye.
signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 7 is the regular agenda, and item A is application for a special retail malt beverage and wine license to the Watertown Area Chamber of Commerce from 5 o'clock p.m. until 8 o'clock p.m. on Thursday, June 3rd, 2021 for the Wine Walk event. Have a motion by Holeen and a second by Rademski. And I will go ahead and just let people know this is an annual event, and we hold the wine walk every year downtown, and it kicks off our Thursday night lives. And if anyone has any questions, we'll be glad to answer those. But I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Is there anyone here that would like to speak about this? Please come forward. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Council, do you have any questions or comments? Anyone? All right, no one? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item B is renewal of alcoholic beverage licenses for the period of July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. I have a, wiggle your hand. Councilman Rademski, motion, and seconded by Vilhar. All right, so this is another regular action that we take. Are there any questions, council? Or comments? Go ahead, Councilman
I guess I'll
Vilhar.
just ask of Kristen, any issues with any of these? Apparently not, or else they would have been required to appear, but any issues?
No issues with these are all the standard renewals. None of them need a public hearing because there's no
Okay,
violation.
thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item C is authorization for the police department to hire a 911 communications manager.
So moved.
Got a motion by Councilman Hoyer and a second by Councilman Holeen. And we have Chief Toomey and Assistant Chief Remmers here to tell us about this item. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak before you, Mayor and City Council. We come before you today to ask for your authorization to hire a 911 manager / supervisor. Assistant Chief Remmers did prepare a slight PowerPoint, and I'll let him explain it.
When Chief Toomey says slight, it's about 6 slides just to show some photos so that you all have an understanding of what we're looking at doing. So prior to 2009, we had a civilian dispatch supervisor. It was a dispatcher who worked as a dispatcher but then also did some supervisory duties. When that person retired in 2009, we chose not to refill the position. Instead, we pushed that managerial responsibility onto a police captain. And I was actually that police captain back in 2009, so I have some of the historical knowledge of what was involved. And then, ironically, I was also that police captain who was still doing that job up until a couple of weeks ago. So I have the current perspective also. Quite a bit has changed since 2009, and that we went from 9 communication officers to 12 full-time plus 2 part-time. The technology has changed quite a bit. That was our old building. This is our new building. It's entirely possible that we continue doing what we had been doing. It's feasible to do that. It's just that it's taking up more and more of that police captain's job nowadays than what it was in 2009 because the job is more technically demanding, and it's also we've expanded to 6 counties, so that means 6 different county governmental bodies that we have to negotiate with and partner with. And so it's a little bit more technically demanding and more complex than it was a decade or so ago. And at present, we estimate that it's about 75% of my old job is 911 manager position. So that only leaves that 25% to do police-related things. What we're here today is to ask permission for you, or from you, to have a civilian 911 manager position. So what that would be is to take it off the hands of the police department and put it over to our 911 center budget instead. We are the 3rd largest public safety answering point, or PSAP, in the state by population. We're one of only 5 that provide service to more than 2 counties, so it truly is a regional 911 center here in Watertown. And again, that just contributes to the complexity here, and it's either tying up a police officer or it's tying up a dispatch supervisor, manager, and that's what we're trying to do. If I could just talk for a couple of moments about our revenues and our expenses and how we were going to fund this. We believe that we have a way to fund this position all the way out through 2027. And this is coming from Finance Director Kristen, has been working with us to secure sources of funding or to lay this out in a budget. And I think here's our projected budget right here, which I believe you all got a copy of also. But we have four primary sources of revenue in the 911 center. You've got our Cottington County 911 telephone surcharges, and then you've got the 5 counties that we contract with, their surcharges. And those all add up to be about a little north of $600,000 a year in 911 surcharge revenue. And then in addition to that, we also have the transfers in of the CIP fund and the general fund. And they kind of go back and forth between about $275,000 to $350,000 a year, depending on the year. So in other words, 65% of our revenue comes from 911 telephone surcharge money. And that telephone surcharge money is designed and meant to provide for 911 services, not for non-emergency or non-911 services. So our dispatch center does do quite a bit more than 911 services. We also provide dispatching services for the Watertown Police Department for those non-emergency or non-911 calls. And in fact, we take 48,000 calls for service a year in the dispatch center, and only 13,000 of them are 911 calls. So that means 27% of the workload in the dispatch center is 911 related. The other 73% is non-911. So if you go back to that revenue, we're funding 73% of our operations with with really only 27% of the revenue coming in. So or 65% of the revenue going towards the 911 center, the 911 surcharges coming in. So the reason I'm telling you that is because the $300,000 to $50,000 a year that the city contributes out of its general fund, I believe is money well spent. That money is going towards, those other thousands and thousands of calls that are not 911 related. Even if we didn't have 911 services being provided out of the dispatch center, we would still need to have a dispatch center because there are, in fact, that 73% of our call volume is non-911. So we would still need to have a dispatch center there. That wouldn't be a 911 dispatch center, but it would be a dispatch center to take traffic stops, burglaries, thefts, those things that don't come in over 911. So there's still a need for that there. What would the new person do? Basically, the new person that we're looking to hire would fill the same role that the police captain was doing or is currently doing. So it's all that working with the other counties, acting as a liaison between the 911 center and the 30 or so different fire departments and a dozen or so different law enforcement agencies, and overall just managing the operations of the 911 center. So they would stay busy. This move would benefit the 911 center in that they would have somebody that could focus 100% of the time on the 911 center. And it would also benefit the police department because what Chief Toomey will talk about here in a little bit is what we're able to do with that, freeing up that current captain position that's currently managing a 911 center. We can do a lot more police-related, community-oriented things on the police side of our department. I'll let Chief Toomey here talk about, or do you want me, I think maybe it makes sense to go through. Let me show you a couple of pictures here. This is our existing 911 center. And I'm not sure if Mitch, if you've got this screen grabbed on here or not so that so anybody else can see that. This is just a quick photo of our 911 center. That wall that's in the background here, this wall right here, was originally constructed as just a temporary wall that kind of hides our shell space that was designed in 2011 when we moved into the building. That is a space that was there for dispatch center expansion. So we need, if we get this position, we need to have a place for that person to have an office. So we're going to use part of that space as an office. This is just that shell space right now where it's currently being used as the photo studio for new employees when they get hired. We come bring them over there and take pictures of them in front of that backdrop right there. But eventually this is what it would look like. It would be just a close-up shot of that. Here would be an office for the 911 communications manager, and then just a small conference room or workroom, training room right next to it. We've got a quote from a local contractor in town that says the top dollar of that would be $62,000 to do that renovation or that construction. And that was an estimate that was erring on the side of being greater than anything we could come up with. In addition to that, we've got about $5,000 in furniture, again, estimated out just for the desk and the tables and such like that. So that is, you've got that first year, if we're allowed to do this right away, the first year starting realistically by June or July 1st, you're looking at a half a year of salary, which this position graded out at a 165. That's the pay grade that the city uses, which translates into about $60,000 a year. So, but that's really about $86,000 a year by the time the benefits come into play. So half of that, plus the construction, plus the furniture, we would be paying for out of the 911 center funds that we have. And then carrying that forward, we'd be able to do this through 2027 before the council would have to address the issue of keeping this person on the payroll or not, beyond into 2028. Now, where we get the funding for this, there's the State 911 Coordination Board has $197,000 earmarked for us for the Watertown PSAP out there for a 911 related project. This qualifies. So we just have to write the proposal in order to collect that money. In addition to that, there's CARES Act money that was put into the 911 center budget, which is $580,000. However, Kristen's more updated numbers than what I had shows that at $648,000 that entered into there last year. And then there's also $137,000 in cash carried over from previous years. So right around the neighborhood of $1 million that's available to us to fund this position. And that's how we would fund it through. You can see at the bottom what Kristen did here is the years shaded in yellow are her projections of where or how long we'd be able to fund this position. And it's not until 2028 that we'd have to deal with how we're going to fund it moving forward. So I think at that point, I'll be able to answer any questions here in a second, but let's let Chief Toomey tell you what we want to do with that freed up position.
I'll bring up the org chart. Thanks, Ryan. It's important to note that we've wanted to do this for quite some time. Even early on when Lee first became chief, we talked about this. This is the most opportune time to do it because those funds that Ryan spoke of are only available for 911 purposes. We can't use them for anything else other than 911 purposes, correct?
Yes.
So if you look at our old org chart, it's pretty flat. So you have three captains, the assistant chief, and Lee. So out of those captains, really the assistant chief was taking care of the lion's share of the operations in the police department. So I had all the law enforcement officers, including patrol and CID, reporting to me. Obviously, I had sergeants as first reporters, but I had to fill out all their evaluations, and so the assistant chief was probably the busiest person in the department, not just because I was doing it, but that's just how it was structured. The 911 captain oversaw the dispatchers, so they had the 13 dispatchers reporting to him, so he was in charge of those supervisory roles. But then you look at like the captain of patrol services up there, and you can see that they didn't have anybody. They weren't supervising anybody, so essentially they were a manager. They didn't have any leadership qualities. They didn't have any opportunities. Well, they had opportunities, but nobody to directly report to them. The captain of support services did the 911. You see the assistant chief, and then the special ops. The only people they were supervising was the two SROs. So what we're going to do with this new captain position, technically it's a new captain position, is change the structure. Traditionally across the country, the chief of police is responsible for the external environment. The assistant chief is responsible for the internal environment. So the assistant chief oversees the day-to-day operations. The chief is responsible for the budget, for public relations, for the vision, for the mission, and overall the whole police department. So we have this new chart where we're going to break it back down to where it was about when was it?
I think it was 2011 we switched to that current system from something very similar to this.
So we used to have this structure, and we had a captain over patrol, we had a captain over the CID, and then we had an administrative captain. So that's what we did. We took all the roles that each one of the captains had, and now we spread them out a little bit more fairly, I guess you could say. This gives every captain the chance to mentor, coach, and be a leader within their division. It gives us the ability to be more efficient because we have a better reporting chain of command for anybody that was in the military. It was the sergeants to me and then to the chief. There was no middle people, so there was no solving any issues at the lowest level. Having that extra layer in there gives our officers the ability to solve the problems at the lowest level. So freeing up this captain is going to be huge for our department. It's going to increase our efficiency, and it's going to make us more productive. It's going to give us an opportunity to get out more into the public, even though we do a fair job at that now, but it will give us the opportunity to do that more. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Thank you, appreciate that presentation, and this makes sense to me. I got to talk one-on-one with them, but I'm sure they can answer any questions if you have them. Oh, okay, Councilman Albertson, we'll start with you.
I'm not sure which one this intended, but maybe Captain Rimmers.
Sure.
Or Assistant Chief Rimmers. You said you were 3/4 time doing that. Now you want a full-time person. What will change with the duties of that person? I'm not quite seeing, I don't think, what that person does if with 13 people that are. How often do you have? How many people do you have on duty at one time? And you know what I'm saying? I'm just really asking what that person does.
Yeah, what that person does. Well, first of all, I'll shed some light on that about the people on duty at any given time. Each of the day parts, those dispatchers work in 8-hour days, so that's divided up into a morning shift, afternoon, and an overnight shift. So there are 4 people on each of those shifts, but of course, because they need days off, that means there are 3 people scheduled to work at any given time. If you were to go over there right now, you'd see 3 people sitting in the chairs there. So it's not so much the day-to-day supervision that I do. We do have what we call lead communications officers. They are one person from each of those shifts serves as a low-level supervisor or a frontline supervisor for each of the shifts. So they're able to handle some of that day-to-day supervision. It's more of the managerial function that I do, and that's the contract issues with the counties. Sometimes it's collecting payment from the counties. It's the liaison activities out, going and introducing ourselves and meeting with the local fire departments and managing that part of the responsibilities too. In addition to that, there's something that I haven't touched on here yet is I'm the county's 911 coordinator, which is what we call the MSAG, or the Master Street Addressing Guide. Every time somebody builds a new house, that house needs to be addressed properly so that it's locatable for emergency services. Now, I'm not the one that comes up with the address. That's First District. We contract with them. But I do need to update that Master Street Addressing Guide so that it maps properly. I dealt with one a couple of weeks ago where somebody built a house out east of Casey's on 19th Street, and I think it was First Avenue South was or First Avenue North maybe, but the road prior to that stopped in the 2100 block. Now they've done construction and added 2 more blocks on there. Somebody builds a house, they go to their local phone company, and they want to have a phone put there, and the phone company says, "Oh, that address doesn't exist." So somebody has to go in and extend the range of that block so that it catches and that it maps correctly for us. So there's a lot of job functions like that are not directly supervising the dispatchers, but it's the technical stuff in the background. That, in addition, just the upkeep and maintenance of the equipment over there. And we've got a great IT staff that helps with that, but their knowledge is limited on the radio side of things and the 911 telephone side of things. So I would venture to guess it's about 2 or 3 times a month that my phone rings in the middle of the night and I got to come in and basically put some duct tape on something until we can call somebody in the morning to put a more permanent fix on it. It's usually fixing or finding a workaround that keeps us operational until the following morning. So I don't know if that shed some light on what you were asking about.
Tag on to that a little bit. They're also responsible for scheduling. They're going to take care of all the scheduling, all the budget. They're going to be responsible for the 911 budget. So they're going to be essentially overseeing the whole department. It's doing them a disservice not having Ryan full-time. It's wasting a gun and a badge in a civilian position, but it's also doing a disservice to the dispatchers, because anytime we switch roles, I mean, it takes a lot to learn about a 911 system. There's so much going on behind the scenes. I would be completely lost if I was in there. And now we're taking a cop in there to manage pretty much a civilian position. We're the only PSAP in the state of South Dakota that has a police officer managing their 911 center. So, I mean, it's definitely an improvement into efficiency on both sides, 911 and police.
Councilman Roby?
Thank you. How many communities utilize our 911 center?
I don't know the communities, but I know the total of population is about 50,000. It's everybody in Grant County, Day County, Clark, Cottington, of course, Hamlin, and Dual County. So
Okay.
did I list off 6 of them?
Only for 911 services.
Okay, and I remember going back to when I was on the 911 committee, you know, those areas get monies sent to them for those types of services. They turn around and give those back to us because
Correct.
they're using our services. I remember at one point, they weren't giving 100% of those. It was less than that. But that was, those numbers were going up. Is it 100% that now comes our way?
Yes.
Then the following question is, the monies we get from them versus our expenses around the center, that gap was widening, if I remember, over the years. Is that still the trend, and what will the trend be going forward?
No, go ahead.
It's getting better in that when you remember, I think when you were involved with it last, it was 75 cents per telephone line that they were being taxed, or that surcharge was 75 cents per line. They have since changed it to $1.25 per line per month. So that helped us offset some of that funding gap that you were talking about. But it's still there. The 911 center still does not operate without some assistance from the city, and to the tune of about $300,000 every year. But again, that was designed to fund the 911 center part of things. If we just did 911, we wouldn't need 3 dispatchers on duty at all times. The reason we have 3 there is because we're taking the large share of what they do, and there is non-911 Watertown Police Department stuff, so.
Just to clarify, if I may, the gap's staying the same then, pretty much?
It's actually getting better.
It's getting better.
With that raised to $1.25,
Okay.
but that's been 4 or 5 years ago, I think, since they did that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Villar?
Both you guys have said this, but I guess I want to ask it of Kristen, not that I'm questioning what you're telling us, but Kristen, the 580,000 or 600 and whatever thousand of CARES Act money, that is specifically designated for 911. In other words, we're not taking away from the general fund, the CARES Act money that came into our general fund.
So when I brought in the CARES Act funding, because the E911 department was what we used to capture some of that funding to get reimbursed from the state, the E911 salaries that I used, I did place into this fund specifically. So that 648,000 was used from E911 to receive the reimbursement. So that's where I put it, not into the general fund.
Okay, so you're okay with what's being proposed then?
Yes, and I don't know if Ryan mentioned it, but the 197,000 has not been secured. But if it is, then with the rest of the layout for up until the 2028 budget, I think it's a very good projection. And I do agree that we can get to about the 2027 without having to seek additional funds from either the general or the capital improvement fund. And a lot could change. As Ryan stated, the surcharge right now is at $1.25. Who says that it won't increase slightly? But yeah, I do feel comfortable with the numbers.
Thank you.
Any other questions, council members? Okay, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, Kristen.
I just did want to point out, so with this being accepted and it's out of the budget, the funding is there, but the appropriations for expenditure would not be in there. So I think Ryan stated that they're anticipating to have this position start in July. So I do want the council to be aware that I will be coming forward for that appropriation. I'm taking this as an approval, but you will see it again to approve the increase of the expenditures.
Got to keep the paperwork right. Yeah, and the person won't start before the office is created, right?
Right, that's correct. Thanks.
Yes. Okay, hopefully you get a contractor right away.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Right, item D is approval of resolution number 21-15, requesting the South Dakota Department of Transportation to select Banner Associates, Inc. to perform the 2021 bridge inspection services for the city of Watertown. A motion by Y and a second by Helene, and I'll ask the Public Works Director, City Engineer Heath Von Eye to tell us about this, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. This is a fairly routine measure here before the council tonight. In relation to our annual bridge inspections that we carry out, we have a series of 10 structures within the city that we're responsible for. Those 10 structures are on the South Dakota DOT's list for inspections. We do rotate them on an every other year basis, so we perform 5 structure inspections per year. If you recall, we had a resolution on the council agenda a couple meetings ago that I pulled. We had initially selected IDG off of the DOT's pre-approved bridge inspection list. Infrastructure Design Group no longer employs their structural engineer. She's gone on to work with another civil engineering company. And in the process of needing to get this inspection backfilled by another consultant, staff has recommended going with Banner Associates for this year's structure inspections. I do have a map here for reference to show you those 10 structures located throughout the community. The 5 circled in red are the ones that would be have an inspection performed on them this year. And I'd stand by for any questions. I would note that our consultant, the representative from Banner, is online with us. If we have any questions, he or I can help address them.
All right, thanks. Will it be Mark Yunker doing the inspections? Do
I
we
believe
know?
Justin found out that it was actually
A different one?
another structural engineer by the name of Adam Hansen. And Adam, I believe you're online with us,
Oh,
correct?
okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. See here. Any questions, Council? Councilman Vilhauer?
The 13.6 referenced here was prior year's number, but whatever the figure is, we're responsible for 20% of that amount?
That is correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Thank you, motion carries. Item E is approval of resolution number 21-19 relating to the improvement of the wastewater collection and treatment facilities, authorizing and directing the issuance and sale of a revenue bond to pay the cost of said improvements, defining the terms and manner of payment of the bond and security thereof, and approving the form of loan agreement, authorizing the mayor to sign all applicable documents.
So moved.
A motion by Helene and a second by Rademski. And I will ask Public Works Director, City Engineer Heath Von Eye to tell us about this, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This particular item has been a joint effort amongst the City Finance Officer, Kristen Bobzine, and the Assistant City Engineer, Justin Peterson, and of course, the Wastewater Superintendent, Mike Berger, and myself. If the council could recall, we've gone through a few measures related to the primary clarifier number 2 replacement. We initially noted the need for that replacement based on an analysis that HDR Engineering performed for us. We subsequently applied to have that facility placed on the state water plan, which was approved. And subsequently, the South Dakota DNR approved the primary clarifier number 2 project to receive a 20-year loan for $2.5 million at an interest rate of 2%. So what's before the council tonight is a resolution authorizing the finance officer to issue the sale of a revenue bond to pay the cost of these improvements. And with that, I would stand by for any questions. I'm sure Kristen's available as well.
All right, thank you. Questions, council members? Councilman Rademski?
What would the life expectancy be of these improvements?
So, Councilman Rademski, that's a good question. I believe the current structure was built in the 60s, I want to say, but that's just off the top of my head. Mayor, I don't know if you recall any more detail than that, but I believe it was in the 60s. So you figure a structure like this, a 30 to 40-year lifespan is not uncommon to see. There are certain components of this structure that are usable, like the roof, that I believe we're planning to utilize on the new structure. But the concrete has degraded to a point where it's structurally incapable of simply repairing it and needs to be replaced. But I'd say that 30 to 40-year timeline.
Councilman Vilhar?
I don't know if it has any bearing on the paperwork itself, but I think under financial impact, that paragraph, don't we want to say would require 4 quarterly payments of $37,992 for an annual total, rather than saying 4 annual payments? You see where I'm at?
Yes, Councilman Vilhar, are you talking under the financial impact section of the
Right.
of the council summary?
Right.
Yes, I would agree with your statement there. That would be a more accurate way to represent that. 4 quarterly payments
Okay.
at $37,992. That's how you'd interpret that as well, correct, Kristen?
That's correct.
Good catch, Councilman. Anyone else? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. We did have one councilman not voting. Parliamentarian, is that all right? City attorney?
What happened?
We have one council member that didn't vote. He stepped away.
Why?
He stepped away.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, it was unanimous, I assume, right?
It was, except one person abstained. Should I just make that note?
Correct.
Okay, so that was Councilman Holeen abstained. Otherwise, the motion carried unanimously. And we'll move on to item F, approval of resolution number 21-20, segregating the surcharge for improvements to the City of Watertown wastewater system for payment of a revenue borrower bond and yearly review of rate, and authorizing the mayor to sign all applicable documents.
So moved.
I have a motion by, I think that was Councilman Hoyer. Was that correct? And seconded by Councilman Vilhauer. And I'll ask Public Works Director, City Engineer Heath Von Eye to tell us about it, please.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'll give credit where it's due here again with Kristen, working closely with Justin and Mike on this particular component, directly related to the last action, of course, that the council just took. This one is essentially solidifying and holding aside the appropriate funds to for us to repay our obligations, our debt obligations. In a nutshell, that's what this is accomplishing. What this means is that there will be a $1.30 surcharge held out of our current rate that we're collecting right now. We are not adding an additional $1.30 to the current rate, but holding a $1.30 out of the current rate and specifically earmarked for the primary clarifier number 2 project funding obligations. If I missed the mark on that summary, Kristen, please feel free to chime in, but otherwise we'll stand by for questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions, council members? Councilman Vilhar?
I would have the same comment again under the financial impact as far as quarterly payments as I had before.
I bet the answer's the same, too.
Correct. 4 quarterly payments at 37. We'll note that, Councilman Vilhauer. Thank you.
Yep. Any other comments or questions? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. All right, item G is approval of resolution number 21-21 for repeal or carryover of capital outlay appropriations from the 2020 fiscal year. I have a motion by Holeen and a second by Bueller. And I will ask the Finance Officer, Kristen Bobzien, to tell us about this, please.
Thank you, Mayor. It is the time of year where I ask the departments to basically put forth any funds from the previous year that were not spent on the capital project side, and those funds can be carried over to the following year. That's actually spelled out in Home Rule Charter that it's allowed. There are a few stipulations. You can only carry over money that's for a project that was started, not completed, or didn't start at all, but you can't kind of commingle the funds. So all of these were designated for what they're listed as, and either the equipment didn't get here in time, or the project didn't start, or it's halfway through completion and needs the funding to carry over to the next year. I'm probably not going to go through every one of these. As I said, these were requests from the departments that knew they needed it to be carried over, and I verified the amount that was available to carry over. If there's specific questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, yeah, this is the capital carryover.
Thank you. Any questions, council, on any of these items or in general? You're letting Kristen off pretty easy. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item H is approval of resolution 21-22, a resolution making recommendations related to the transition to a city council, or excuse me, transition to a council manager form of government. I have a motion by Helene and a second by, was it you? Albertson. I heard it over there, just wasn't. Okay, and I will ask the city attorney, Matt Roby, to tell us about this, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Early in February, a subcommittee of the council began to meet, and I believe there was a total of 4 meetings held, just kind of kicking around thoughts and ideas regarding the upcoming transition to the council manager form of government, and kind of taking a look at the Home Rule Charter and what it spells out for the duties of the city manager as well as the mayor, taking a look at the state statute and what statutes provide in that regard, and just trying to see if there's anything, as well as our ordinances, of course, and taking a look there to see what the provisions there provide. And so just taking a look to see if there's anything that needed to be done, any holes that needed to be filled, any tweaks that needed to be made, perhaps to make the transition smooth, and to maybe just make some matter of course amendments to our ordinance. So what you have in front of you here is a resolution that was kind of the culmination of those discussions. There was a lot more discussed than what you see here, but I would defer to Councilman Holeen to maybe dive into maybe some of the meat of this for the council's consideration.
Actually, Matt, I'm going to kick it off with just a couple of comments first. I think as we went into this, I think there was probably expectation that we'd come out with kind of a grocery list or 2 columns of duties that city manager does, the column that what mayor does. Well, I think as we looked at this, we realized already that our home rule charter lays out pretty well what the respective duties are. So rather than try to redo that, and because the Home Rule Charter Review Committee 2 years ago looked at those respective duties. So rather than reinventing the wheel and doing or undoing what they did or revising what they did, which would then require a vote of the people because we're amending the Home Rule Charter, we took a little bit different tact on this and felt maybe let's just look at some areas that need some clarification rather than trying to come up with that grocery list of respective duties. And that's where we ended up with the resolution that we've got before us. So with that, I guess I'll turn over to the rest of the committee members or the rest of the council in general for specific questions or comments they've got.
Councilman Holeen?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to point out the work done by the committee, which was Councilman Villauer, Councilman Albertson, Councilman Bueller, Councilwoman Manti, and myself, with Matt Roby, our city attorney, and Jelaine Pifley, our HR director, sitting in on every meeting. I think we met 4 times, and we had a lot of good discussion. At my request, Matt has included the minutes and the background information of all of those meetings. Minutes were taken, notes were taken, with the idea that this would provide legislative intent for councils in the future. So in the future, if anyone ever had a question regarding what the city manager and the mayor the demarcation of duties should be, they can look back upon the notes that are now included in the official minutes of the council for tonight, and they can at least read and see what we talked about at that time. There might be some more suggestions forthcoming, but as of right now, this is I'd say just a clear separation, the idea of just setting forth the expectations of both jobs, the limitations of both jobs, as to what we thought the Home Rule Charter meant and the people of Watertown wanted when they voted upon it. So we, as a committee, I think I could speak for all of us, would urge the council's favorable approval. I do have what is called a friendly amendment, which is meaning that the committee has been briefed upon this and we are all in agreement that this is something that should be added to the resolution. And Mayor, I can make that at a time that you would like. I can wait after further council discussion or make it now.
Oh, I think make it now.
Okay. If you would recall, the mayoral job description committee got off to a rocky start with the selection of committee members. After that, it went swimmingly. I think that there was very little disagreement. There was a lot of good discussion, but very little disagreement. The only disagreement that we had was at the formation of this committee, and that was how the committee would be made up. With that in mind, on page 2 in the resolved, paragraph 4, I would like to make an amendment where it says, beginning in July of 2022 and then annually thereafter for 3 years, a committee consisting of the deputy mayor and 2 other members of the city council shall convene to review and make recommendations to the full city council regarding the roles of mayor and city manager. I would like to define how that committee is chosen right now so that we do not have an argument in the future. So the suggestion that I would make for an amendment would be to change the reading to a committee consisting of the deputy mayor and 2 other members of the city council appointed by the deputy mayor. Pretty simple amendment. It would reflect the intent of the committee, so I would ask for a second on that and favorable consideration by the council on that amendment.
I would second that.
We have sorry, who was it? You, so we have Holeen and Albertson. Okay. Councilman Vilhauer?
Just a comment to what Councilman Colleen just proposed, because we're using some terminology that is not familiar to maybe even us as a council or the public, and that's the deputy mayor. That is a position that's coming into place with the city manager, and the deputy mayor is elected by us as a council. So we'll be doing that here in a few months, whoever's on the council. So that's how the deputy mayor's position is selected.
Mayor, I also agree with Councilman Holeen's amendment.
Sure. Okay. Anyone else have any comments on that? Councilman Y?
Thanks, Mayor. Just to be clear on that, Glenn, so then a city council member will also carry the title of deputy mayor?
According to the Home Rule Charter, that is correct. Matt, chime in if I'm misstating that, but that is a position brought in by our Home Rule Charter now.
Right, so we won't have a council president and council vice president anymore. We'll have the mayor and the deputy mayor. The mayor's a voting member of the council come July. Any other questions or comments on the amendment? Okay, we'll vote on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, any discussion on the resolution? Councilman Vilhauer?
Just one final comment from my perspective. I think we look at this, our committee looks at this as being a beginning, ongoing process, and not something that we've done now to never do again. Because we got to kind of live into our new form of governance here. So it's going to be something that we will, like it points out here, we will be reviewing on an ongoing basis. So it's an ongoing situation, not an end in and of itself right now.
All right. Yes.
I have one other discussion point. It's relating to the resolution, but it is a possible amendment, so I don't want to offer it before every council member has the option of speaking upon the resolution itself. So I don't want to interrupt anyone, but neither do I want you to call a vote before it's time. So if I see anyone with their hand raised, or Michael, I think, might have his hand raised, I don't want to speak before he has a chance.
Sure. Councilman Hoyer?
I just wanted to say thanks to everyone, of course, for doing the work you did on it. I think it was a really good precedent maybe to set with the amount of minute taking. I know that creates a lot of work, but maybe that is something in the future that we do want to do on some of our little boards just for increased transparency and everything. I think this board did a really great job of putting those notes together for everyone just so they could be abreast of all the information as it was happening. So that might be something we might want to do in the future. Is just a good practice for one another. The only other thing I kind of had is I think it's page 3 of all this, so page 2 really of the resolution here, where we say on 1, the council expects the mayor and city manager to closely adhere to the demarked responsibilities under charter and statute, and specifically expects the mayor to avoid all administrative tasks. I guess my only concern with that is that it's just a little redundant. If we've already listed it in the charter, I don't know, putting the council's, we expect you to do this. I mean, it's clearly outlined in the charter, but you know, maybe that's just a little too nitpicky, but to me, it just seems a little bit redundant.
Agree. It is. Matt,
Well, I guess I would just, to that point, I guess I would just state that language kind of resulted from what Councilman Vilhauer mentioned earlier, that after the group convened and took a closer look at what the charter actually says and what the statute actually says, I think it found that many of the questions were already answered. And so I think that that statement there, while it does sound redundant, I think it maybe just expresses the conclusion of the group that, you know, it is there. We expect it to be followed. So I guess, yes, in the sense it is redundant, but it does just come out of the, again, just the realization of the group that maybe what we were looking to spell out is already spelled out.
Right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Councilman Holeen.
Thank you, Mayor. As Councilman Vilhauer mentioned, this was meant to be an ongoing process, and part of that ongoing process might be able to start tonight. I have a topic of discussion for the entire council, a possible amendment, but in our committee discussions, we could not come up with a clear answer on several issues that we thought were important enough that would nonetheless require full council conversation to see if the full council had better ideas than just the committee did, or possibly if there was further, you know, consensus as to what we should be doing going forward. One of those questions I would like to raise tonight, and again, it's more of a clarification thing so that problems don't result in the future. We are entering into a new form of government. With new form of government, we will have new questions that will result. I would really like to see, and I think I speak for everyone in this room, a very smooth transition to the city manager form of government. We only have one chance to do it right the first time. We have to start off on the right step, the first step. So in this resolution, you will see that the mayoral job description committee, which changes its name to the mayoral and city manager job description, I think it's what it's called, was going to be an ongoing committee for at least 3 years, with the initial meetings starting in July of 2022. That is also in number 4 of the resolved on page 2. There was some question as to when this would start and the timing of it. I will refer to the mayoral job description committee notes, part 2, meaning our second meeting. Somewhere in there, I highlighted this. No consensus on the timing was found for this ongoing committee, but the idea received unanimous consent. So the entire committee was unanimous in supporting that this should be an ongoing committee to make sure that there is a smooth, constant transition into the new form of government. But we never did nail down completely when it would start and how often it would meet. I will fully take the responsibility for the person. I wanted to have an early meeting, and I will suggest at 6 months after the transition to the form of government, simply because I think that if there are problems with the transition into a city manager and a mayor, they will be evident early and they should be addressed as early as possible. So I would just like to offer for discussion and a possible amendment, changing the wording of number 4 to beginning in January of 2022, a committee consisting of the deputy mayor and 2 other members of the city council selected by the deputy mayor or appointed by the deputy mayor, shall convene to review and make recommendations to the full city council regarding the roles of the mayor and city manager. This committee will meet again in July of 2022 and then annually thereafter for 3 years. So it basically just adds 1 meeting to January of 2022 at the 6-month mark after the transition to the form of new government for an early review, and then we'll have another one. So it basically just adds 1 meeting. Now, hopefully, this results in nothing. Hopefully, we have an incredibly smooth transition of government, and the committee meets and says, hey, everything's going great. We don't need to bring any proposals to the full council. But I feel it's better to be cautious than regret not having this. So I would entertain this. I hope that the council would support this idea, but open for consideration.
Okay, so I didn't get all of it. So number 4, the change
Would be
is to beginning.
Okay, I will read it again. So beginning in January of 2022, a committee consisting of the deputy mayor and 2 other members of the city council appointed by the deputy mayor shall convene to review and make recommendations to the full city council regarding the roles of mayor and city manager. This committee will meet again in July of 2022, and then annually thereafter for 3 years.
Okay. Okay. So, Councilwoman Manti?
Just 2 things. One was more of just a bookkeeping or semantics issue or whatever. I just wanted to clarify that this isn't a job description committee. Job descriptions connote that it's a position that can be hired or fired. The mayor is an elected official. So, and that's what we called it all along, Reed, so I'm not saying, but what we changed it to was the official was mayor, city manager, duties, powers, and responsibilities committee, which better reflects a hired position and an elected position. So just make that clarity out there for people who may not be able to read the document. And secondly, I would go along with Reed's suggestion of having that first meeting. I had always thought that this could be a committee that could be convened at any time if there was a certainly an urgent or emergency situation. But if we want to put it in there as 6 months and then every year thereafter, I don't think that puts an undue burden on people. I think that that's probably a pretty reasonable thing to do, given that this is a major change. So I would support that addition.
Thank you. Councilman Hoyer?
I guess my only concern with it is that, to me, coming from a fast-moving organization previously, is that it takes about 6 months to just kind of get in the pocket in your job, because there's going to be some learning going on, potentially with whoever gets hired in this, and then also, we don't know who all the players are going to be in those 2 positions yet. So I fear that 6 months might be a little too premature, and some of these issues can kind of resolve just by watching. If we saw a red flag, I think we could just as easily convene this off a choice The annual thing, of course, is written in, but realistically, Beth kind of mentioned it, even though she supported it the other way, that, you know, we can just call it if we need to, if we feel like something's really concerning. The other part is, I'm just want to make sure I'm reading it right. I think in the original way it's written, it doesn't have that the deputy mayor appoints the members. I think I'd be more comfortable if we did that as a group, just because it does, and somebody, Councilman Vilhauer, I think you really looked into this well. With the deputy mayor position, does that have the power already within it to appoint? And then, yeah, if it's there due to that, then great. But otherwise, I kind of feel like maybe we should be appointing as a council in that scenario.
Well, just a point of clarification, that's what we just voted on.
It was voted on, but do you want attorney to comment on that, Michael?
Sure. I mean, it's just really that the deputy mayor position is it when Councilman Holeen read his verbiage on that, it just had the appointing on it. So that's, and it previously didn't, I guess. So that's my kind of confusion with it. I know we kind of talked about it. Maybe I just missed that little detail.
I guess, you know, the language I have written down from the First Amendment was appointed. And as far as any formal authority that the deputy mayor may have, I mean, we're kind of creating this out of thin air here. So it's not, there's nothing to turn to ask what authority they might have or not have as it relates to this committee that is being created kind of as we speak. So again, to what the mayor just said, that language was just added in at the last amendment, appointed by deputy mayor.
So it's a non-quorum group that would review, but the council as a whole, if they took any action, that would be the entire council, right?
Yeah, correct. It would be really no different than the committee that maybe has been meeting here. Of course, it'll be less people because the council will have less members. And so it'll be a group of 3 people instead of 5. And if they identify an issue that's cropped up, then they could bring forward a proposal to the council for full council consideration, whether that be an ordinance amendment or, you know, of course, a home rule charter amendment creates a whole new set of requirements. But yeah, it would certainly just be a recommending group. It could not make any formal changes.
Sure, that makes sense. Talking about it. I guess I would just defer back to then that I don't think the 6 months is necessary. I think annual is plenty, and it gives everyone a fair shot to kind of get used to their position. And, you know, we're monitoring the whole time. So if anything's glaring, I'm sure that we could just do that on our own.
Okay. Councilwoman Manti, is your hand still up, or did you have another?
Yeah, no, it
comment?
is. It is. I was just going to hopefully help Michael understand, I mean, or get a comfort level with that, you know, the deputy mayor is elected by the entire council. So the thought process was that he had the trust of the council, he or she, and that that person was going to do what's in the best interest of the city and of the, you know, council. So that's why we were comfortable with the idea of the deputy mayor making those appointments. And like you said, as we talked about it, it just made more sense. But that was the thinking behind it, was that the person who becomes deputy mayor is obviously a trusted member. We all should be trusted. But I guess what I'm getting at is that the rest of the council has elected this person. And so that means we're putting our trust in that person to be able to handle some of these little things like that. Does that make you feel more comfortable with it?
Yeah, I was good with that as soon as Matt kind of laid it out. I mean, it's just always a checks and balances thing, and it's clear there is a check to it. So I'm good with that. I think at this point, the discussion is just annual versus biannual, or not biannual, but semi the first year.
Yep. Thank you. Councilman Roby?
Thank you. I would agree with the 6-month first swing at that. In the best case scenario, it's a 5-minute meeting. Things are going well and it's over in 5 minutes, but that's one. But the second point is our city manager is going to have a review at 6 months, and I think it makes sense to line up with that. So I think that's an easy one.
Good point. Anyone else? Councilman Villar?
I don't think we as a committee had these very same discussions, and you're seeing an annual mention here, but I don't think any of us necessarily wedded to that. I guess we wanted to get more feedback from the rest of the council, and I think we're hearing that there probably is a desire to have a review sooner rather than later. So I guess I would support it as well as a committee member.
Okay. Anyone else? I do not have a motion for that.
I think I made the motion,
Okay.
but we don't have a second yet.
Yeah, need a second. I have a second by Rademski. Motion by Holene and second by Rademski to add the changes to item number 4 that were outlined. Kristen, do you need me to read those again? Or do you have them down?
No, I have them. Thank you,
Okay.
Mayor.
Yep. All right. We've had quite a bit of discussion. Any last minute comments on the amendment? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries, and we still have the resolution. Does anybody want to bring anything else up about the resolution in general? Any other comments about that? See none, I'll look for action.
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I would just note then that those last 3 pieces of the resolution mentioned the ordinance changes, and so those will be forthcoming. At the plan right now is to have that be first reading at the first meeting of May to come forward with those ordinance changes for council consideration.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Villar?
Just as a follow-up to what Matt just said, just so people aren't thinking that there's going to be some significant or massive ordinance changes, this is just going to be cleanup throughout our ordinances to properly utilize the term mayor and city manager. It's nothing that's going to significantly change, but it's something that does need to be done, though.
Right. Anyone else? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, item I is approval of letter agreement with Tegra Group to act as a consultant to the city during the initial stage of the multi-purpose ice facility project. I have a motion by Vilhauer and a second by Holene, and I'll ask the city attorney, Matt Roby, to explain this.
Thanks, Mayor. I can tee it up, and then Bruce or anybody else can chime in on kind of what the thinking is here. But as everybody knows, the council has approved a memorandum of understanding relating to the multi-purpose ice facility. And recently, the city contacted Tegra Group, Dick Strasberg, a principal with Tegra Group, had a discussion with him. He's an individual who we've contracted with in the past on the Prairie Lakes Wellness Center to basically act as a representative of, in the case of the Wellness Center, of course, he was the owner's representative. In this situation, we have a little bit of a different interest as a lessee, but essentially he'll be acting on behalf of the city to make sure all of our needs are being met throughout the process. But this what you have in front of you here is just a short letter agreement providing an hourly rate for him to kind of get a grasp on the whole project. And then potentially we would look at entering into a more long-term agreement with him related to the project. Other than that, Bruce or anybody else, go ahead and chime in.
All right, thank you.
Mayor, I could jump
Councilman
in.
Bueller.
As Matt had mentioned, we'd used the Tegra Group out of Minneapolis on that project, the Wellness Center. And we felt like they did a really good job for us. We did have an opportunity to bring Dick Strasberg, the representative, one of the principals from that group, into Watertown for discussion and questions. And, so everybody had an opportunity to sort of see what they had to offer. I think in the long run, the whole idea behind this is to protect the city as an owner. And, we've got different facets of ownership here with the WDC. with the city down the road owning this, but we also want to protect everyone that could be involved, any of the owners, from any negative issues that could happen down the road. And we really did have good experience with these folks before, and it'll help protect the city in the long run as this project moves forward. And it's fairly typical with multi-million-dollar projects like this. And I felt like it was very beneficial to us with the wellness center. And I just think they'll do a great job. And we did set a cap for them to start, as Matt mentioned. And at some point, if we decide to enlist more of their services down the road, we'd have that opportunity to bring them forward to see what other areas they might be able to help us with. But I think it's really good to have somebody on board like that.
Thank you. And I agree with you completely, Councilman Bueller. And it really did give me an extra level of confidence moving forward that, we're not experts on this sort of thing, but we're hiring somebody who will be looking out for our interests as a community. So I think that's really good. Anyone else? Councilman Holeen?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, for people watching this, listening to this, I wanted to explain a little bit what Tegra Group did. They consist of lawyers, architects, developers, all sorts of people across the spectrum, so they can bring all sorts of expertise. So in the beginning, they will be offering legal expertise just to look over the contract because it is a four-way contract. And then they will also be watching out for the taxpayers to make sure that the the steel ordered is coming in at a reasonable cost according to the market. There's no overcharges, things like that. So it protects the taxpayers, and it also protects the people of Watertown when they say, if you're going to do it right. And that's the other thing that an owner's rep does for us. Makes sure that we're doing it right because he can have input over the entire architectural and make sure that the facility is the one that we want. I also just wanted to point out one more thing, which is I have talked to all four parties involved. Now, granted, this was before the new Watertown Development Company gentleman is going to come tonight, but I talked with Michelle Kakachik, and she and I discussed that. WDC agrees with the idea of an owner's rep. Jesse Craig of Craig LLC and J&J Earthworks, we're all in agreement that this is a good idea. So just wanted to make that clear.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. Anyone else? Okay, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Item J is presentation by Watertown Fire Rescue on 2020 annual report. And we have both the Fire Chief Kranz and Assistant Fire Chief Rowland to give us a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We have a short video we're going to play, and then we have a PowerPoint, and we will take questions throughout the PowerPoint as they come up on that slide, and also take some questions at the end.
Of course, we couldn't be outdone by our colleagues from the police department. We have some really tech-savvy folks that work for us at the fire department, and the two individuals that put this together are paramedic firefighter Andrew Seebeck and Michael Mack. So, Mitch, if you want to play that for us.
I was born to be making history, something greater, something higher. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire. It's plain reality. I was born to be something greater, something higher. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire. I was born to be.
Okay, now we just have a PowerPoint with some of our data and stuff for the year and a little bit about what we're about. So feel free to ask questions as they come through.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council tonight. Again, we really are proud to put together a video like that to show you exactly what we do every day at Watertown Fire Rescue. We're a very professional group and excited to always take care of our citizens, our community. This is a picture that we took actually pre-COVID. This is a 2020 picture, believe it or not. This was in January. We actually do a paramedic research class where we do a 3-day venture in January, and we felt this would be the best time to get everybody there and get in our Class A and Class B uniforms, and this is one of the first ones we've done in a long time, so we're pretty excited about getting that done before the pandemic hit us. Okay, kind of the things we'll talk about here tonight is our ambulance service a little bit, our fire service in general, aircraft rescue services, fire prevention a little bit, the South Dakota All Hazards team, as well as some of our WFR 2020 highlights. Now, just a little bit of what we do and where we cover. I think most of you that have been upon the council for a long time, you pretty much know that we serve 9 townships, which represents about 327 miles of the Cottington County. We also took on an EMS MOU this year. I think most of you guys are aware in 2020. That took a little time to get done, but we finally were able to procure those agreements with those townships. We serve 14 townships and 4 villages. So that's pretty much the greater part of Cottington County in general. A little bit about our ambulance service stats. Last year was obviously a record year for us again, as far as numbers go. We have 5 advanced life support ambulances that we maintain each day. In general, our staff trains about 1,000 to 1,500 annual hours a year just to be paramedics. They're very professional in what they do, and they do a really nice job of keeping up their certifications. In 2020, we responded to 2,873 calls, up 4.2% from the calendar year. One thing I'll share with you is this number here isn't, this is our county calls that we have. We actually went up 21% in 2020 in our EMS calls outside of city limits. I think you guys are aware of the county calls work for us. We answered 185 in 2019 and roughly like 225 in 2020. So we actually had a few more. Here's just kind of a breakdown of some of our ambulance calls. As you can see, we do a lot of medical calls up on the pie chart, as well as cardiac and trauma. Trauma can be just a fall from a senior that fell down in his home, and we have to go help do a lift assist or maybe even do a patient exam where we actually take those folks to the hospital. But as you can see, in general, quite a few other types of calls. Our behavioral health calls are continuing to rise on an everyday basis when it comes to these types of calls. Mental health is something that's a big thing in our community. When you come to the fire service stats a little bit, one thing that we're really proud of at Watertown Fire Rescue is when we respond to fire calls in general to family dwelling homes, we are able to get the fire out to a room and content 89% of the time with what the staff we have when we get on scene. Now, that doesn't mean a lot for the folks that lose a lot of their possessions. We take a lot of factors into our objectives, our overall objectives. We take life safety, instant stabilization, property preservation is a huge focal point when we go on scene. And we do everything we possibly can to save whatever we can for those victims because they are very traumatic of what they've just had. You know, this recently we had 2 major fires in our community that were horrible for those families. So we do everything we can to preserve those items for them. As you can see, we responded to 770 calls last year with an increase of about 5.2%. And our county calls again went up quite a bit, almost 50+% last year in our local area. This is a breakdown of our types of calls last year in 2020. We go on a lot of EMS assist. What that means, everybody, is we send a truck to higher level of care of medical emergencies, such as respiratory distress, cardiac arrest, cardiac calls, trauma. So when an ambulance goes by, and sometimes you see an engine company follow behind with them, they're actually going on scene. And we're finding that we have better outcomes if we get 4 advanced life support paramedic firefighters on the ground to help with those patients. Their outcomes at the hospital improve drastically if we can get more boots on the ground at those scenes.
Just one comment about that. It's important to realize that when that big fire truck goes down the road, it can be still available for another call, and we'll sometimes dispatch that right from that emergency medical scene to a fire scene, and they have all their equipment and staffing with them, so that's why they're mobile and able to assist with EMS. So.
And here's just kind of a breakdown of 2016 through 2020. As you guys can see, we've had an increase, almost 500 calls in the last 5 years from 16 to 20, represents about 19%. And our fire calls have jumped up, you know, in that 40+% range as well. So in general, each year we continue to answer more and more calls. People ask me, well, why do we answer more EMS calls or fire calls? I think people are, obviously our community is getting a little bit older, so we have more senior calls. But education-wise, I think people know that we are bringing an emergency room on wheels to the scene. When you call an ambulance and we get on scene, we treat you and we make you better a lot of times before we get you to the hospital. So I think from a standpoint of education, I think our community understands the importance of our EMS service that we have in our city. Fire prevention, stats and highlights a little bit. Obviously the pandemic put a lot of implications on what we could do from a CDC standpoint, but in general, we still were able to get out 250 smoke detectors. Chip Primus leads that fire prevention division for us and does a fantastic job for us. Generally, we try to get 500 to 600, and a lot of times we get into a lot of the mobile home parks, areas that don't have a lot of carbon monoxide detectors or smoke detector. And like we said last year or a couple years ago, we've actually responded to homes that have actually had smoke detectors put in their trailer and had good success of getting those folks out. In general, we had 285 fire inspections last year, which was up about 13.5% for us. We also have the Fire Children's Safety House, and generally speaking, 350 plus kids go through that on an annual basis. Again, unfortunately, we had to take more of a virtual settlement because last year, obviously, the kids were out of school quite a bit. Here's our calls for service in general when it comes to last year, 2020. We have other hats that we wear every day, from the ambulance being a paramedic to firefighters to aircraft rescue firefighting personnel, and as well as fire prevention. So just kind of give you a general breakdown of our total calls for service, which is 5,196 last year. Here's our aircraft rescue firefighting responsibilities that we have, just some general pictures of what we did last year from training. We train about 900 hours annually, and that's a big deal when it comes to our commercial airline service. We have a staff member out there for all commercial airlines, obviously, when they come in for our flights each day. But that stated, they have to all have a live fire burn every year with a federal aviation certification. And they train anywhere from, like I said, 900 plus hours a year. Each staff member has X amount of hours that the FAA requires us to do. Matter of fact, our department is modeled by other departments across the Midwest when the FAA auditor comes in and actually does inspections. Our South Dakota Task Force 1, we are part of 4 teams in the state: Aberdeen, Watertown, Rapid City, and Sioux Falls, respectively. On an annual, we probably have 50 plus team members train annually at all 4 cities. We have hazmat, we have high angle rescue, we have confined space, we have structural collapse, and we also have trench rescue. As you saw in the video, there's a lot of different types of training these guys are doing. Now we respond to various, all types of high hazard type incidents each calendar year as well, not only in our community, but also outside our community. Some of our highlights from 2020. We got a new fire pumper tender. Thank you to the council for allowing us to get that. We replaced one of our Type 3 remount ambulances, and that's this one right here, Medic 2. We also received some grants, more than $120,000 worth, and some of those grants were for our portable medical grade oxygen cylinder. That's this right here. This basically allows us to fill all our ambulances up with medical grade oxygen without having to go through companies in town to actually have an invoice of a couple $1,000s a year, so this saves us quite a bit of money. The mobile radios, that was a really good thing. Last year we came before you, myself, and I think even Chief Toomey came before you and asked to apply for the CARES Act funds to allow us to be able to get more portable radios. We're up against kind of a time constraint here coming up in 2023. The P25 compliancy is really important, and not only is Watertown Fire Rescue getting more compliant, Watertown Police Department is as well. We've been able to get on board a little bit quicker, and I know that we're doing much better. I know that the chief was at a conference here out at this last weekend, and they talked about the compliancy aspect, didn't they, Doug? And I think we're way ahead of the game for the most part.
Yes.
Okay. And then also we were able to get some mobiles as well for our trucks. Here's kind of some fun stuff that we were able to do last year because of the pandemic. I think a lot of you folks up here have kids and grandkids that unfortunately their birthdays came and they weren't able to have family, friends, have a birthday party. And we made their day a little bit brighter by bringing the fire truck to their home. 600 plus kids from May through June, and thank you for allowing us to do that and making such a really big difference in their lives. We partnered with Watertown Park and Rec last year and created these fire hydrant parties. And they were an overwhelming success to the point where I believe we're going to be doing more of those, Mayor. I think this year, we talked about that at the last department head meeting. So I know that the pool's going to be opening, but we're still going to do a couple of these as well because I think they were just a fun thing for everybody. Now, we completed a SWOT, a strength, weakness, opportunities, and threat, back in 2019. And we created some strategic goals in our strategic plan. And some of those I'll let the chief kind of touch on a little bit.
Okay, the first one, NFPA 1710, strive to meet that. That's where we want a certain number of staff and on scene of every fire, and our goal is to get to that point. Each firefighter has a job, and we want 14 staff on that scene on most fires, sometimes 15, and that includes when we get a fire call, that's all of our staff, and we still don't meet that. So we're able to put out more fire at a safer to our firefighters, and it's very important for us to continue to work towards that goal. Number two is improve the ability of providing services. The East Fire Station will make us more uniform across our whole service area by providing quicker response times. Obviously, right now, some of our response times get into that 13 and 14-minute range towards the interstate and stuff. And with an East Fire Station in place, we will get that engine or that ambulance on scene. If we can get to a cardiac arrest within 5 minutes, the outcomes are greatly improved on that. Number three, increase the quality and quantity of applicants to Watertown Fire Rescue for our paramedics. We rely heavily on the Lake Area Technical College program for our students right now, and we probably rely on that a little bit too much. We want to make sure we're expanding to reach out to other areas that we can get quality applicants as well. Number four, expand our training. Overall, improve and organize the overall training that we currently do. When we do train, we want to train with purpose, and we train more on things that we use less of, and train less on things we use more every day. So we will make sure we stay up to speed and keep it fresh and realistic as possible. And we train with our equipment that we have on the trucks. So when we go out to the training center, we will actually take our primary pumper and put that down at the training center and take our reserve truck and put it in the bay. So that equipment we're taking off the truck on a training day is the same one we're taking off on a fire. Firefighter safety. Fires are more dangerous and now than ever. Lightweight construction, residential homes and things, they'll collapse within minutes of direct flame contact. So we want to make sure we keep up to speed with all the communications, air packs, and accountability, making sure we know where all of our staff are at all times. So very important that we look at all those things. Health and wellness to the firefighters. Cancer prevention. Cancer is still the number one cause of death in firefighters. And so it's something we always look at. We've done a lot of things on decon. Our trucks, the interiors of our trucks are now made out of different materials, so we can wipe them down. Our turnout gear, we take and wash those after every fire, and we do checks on them to make sure they're not off-gassing. We store them in the storage area when we're off duty. They're not allowed to come into the living quarters with gear on, so we don't also like to carry them in our vehicles, our cabs and things like that when we're going to and from fire scenes. So, you know, we've made vast improvements on that. And physical fitness and mental health, also very mental health along with the police and fire, all public safety. It's a lot of stress in our jobs, and so we want to always make sure we're aware of that and have plenty of resources for our employees. Physical fitness, our department has done a lot of different training, and we're updating that all the time. We want to make sure we live a healthy lifestyle in eating and also doing physical fitness, and these are all done by our employees. Nothing's mandatory, but they train and practice for these drills every year. And last, the last one, we currently have an ISO of 2 in the city of Watertown for our fire department. We're right on that bubble, so we want to make sure our next audit is coming up in 2023. We want to make sure we are always prepared for that, so we have a committee at the fire department that is always looking at ways that we can improve on that.
Councilman Billhauer?
Question on that, you say maintain or improve. As I understand it, getting something higher than 2 probably is not feasible for Watertown from prior presentation you guys have made. Is that a fair statement? Or?
Yes, that is correct. Probably we are not going to get to 1, and our goal is not to get to 1, but we barely made a 2, and so we want to, I mean, we made a 2 by less than 1%, so we want to make sure we don't fall backwards on that. So we look at all areas where we can gain those points and keep our points current. We don't lose any of that. We do have. Good question.
So Councilman Vilhauer, we were at 81.99 on that, if you remember in our presentations. The improvement would be obviously to get above that just a little bit more and stick with that ISO 2 for the most part.
Give a little cush.
A little cush, yeah, for sure. Of these 7 strategic goals that we've listed here, we have members of our administration working on these quarterly, meeting with our staff, researching and investigating every way possible to continue to meet the SWOT analysis that we put together. Okay, this is kind of something Doug talked about earlier. This is the NFPA 1710. We've shared this presentation slide before to you. What this basically means in a nutshell, everybody, is we need a fire truck on the scene in 4 minutes. This is a national standard, everybody. Within 4 minutes, 90% of all the incidents we go to in Watertown. We hit it about 78% of the time. And what are the downfalls? Well, the downfalls are very simply put. Doug talked about safety, our staff, life safety of the people that we're going to. We cannot make rescue with 4 people in a building, but I'm here to tell you our firefighters will. They will do whatever they can to do what they have to do to save that person or that family member's pet or whatever it may be, a possession. They will make entry even with the lightest amount of people that we have on scene. So this is still a big component that we'll continue to try to strive for as we move forward in the coming days, months, and years. Here's our Station 3 concept. This is a 3-bay design with basically about 8,000 to 10,000 square feet, Doug, I believe.
Yes, it'd be 8,000 to 10,000 square feet. We want it to fit into wherever this building is going to look. We want it to be there for a long time, so it'll be pretty well built. Probably have a pitched roof on it, but we want it to blend in with whatever area it would serve. So.
And just briefly on a business plan, objectively, when it comes to Station 3, it is 2023 is when we still have it in our long-term capital outlay. Site plan, obviously we were working with engineering and they're doing a fantastic job working with us to help find a site for us. Capabilities of it are mostly about what kind of fire station is it going to be? Is it a fire EMS station or is it an EMS station only? So those are the kind of things we're still researching. Design and flow, is it a 8 to 10,000 square foot building, 3 apparatus bays? You know, speaking from the design. The construction, is it about $3 million or less is kind of where we're at right now. The operating maintenance costs are around $50,000. Staffing plan is still in that 6 to 9 number that we'll be talking about as we get into a business plan with that staffing plan. Funding, when it comes to staffing, we're talking about the SAFER grant, the Staffing for Adequate Fire Emergency Response. Same thing goes with the Fire Cops grant. That's where you get the funding for the staffing for those folks. If we ask for 6 to 9 people, if we meet NFPA 1720, there's a high likelihood that we'd receive that grant. So that's something we'll talk about at a later date. Community benefits, obviously response times, and just getting the same, the people that will live downtown in this area within 4 to 6 minutes of their fire station, they get a great fire response. But also when it comes to the fact that if you don't get somebody there within 5 minutes or less, if somebody's in cardiac arrest, you have a 50% chance of survivability. If we don't get there with a defibrillator in 8 minutes, you know, basically after 5 minutes, it decreases by 10% a minute. So if we get to 8 minutes, it's 20% chance. We get to 10 minutes without a defibrillator starting CPR, it's a 0% chance. So the quicker we get there with a defibrillator and starting good, adequate CPR, we have a great outcome for our patients again. So we've had some really good successes here in the last couple years. The national average is about 36% where somebody gets to the hospital with that's been in cardiac arrest with a pulse and they're breathing from a respiratory standpoint. We average anywhere from 52 to 58%. I think it's more about some of our capabilities and our staff and our folks. Our police department does a fantastic job getting there quick enough too to help us with that. Community benefits, obviously we talked about those, and the call volume estimates, coverage areas are the next slide here. And this is kind of what we do. I want to make sure that we understand when we do a Station 3, where are these calls coming from? Remember, this is our 2,873 ambulance calls from 2020. Of those, 1,542 would have been at Station 1, 53% of our calls. Of those at Station 2, this is a factual number, there was 506. And Station 3, if we would use the geographical location that we've identified with 11th Street all the way up to 14th Avenue cutting across up to 81, that would be our primary Station 3 area in the southeast and northeast part of the city. And that would cover about 825 ambulance calls, or 28% of all our ambulance calls. So that kind of gives you a breakdown. We try to do this each year so we can continue to forecast as we can continue to move on with our projections.
And in the green and purple circles are 1 and 2 mile radiuses where we'd like to have those overlaps, cover each other, but yet spread out enough to where we can cover the city response areas for a number of years.
So that is our presentation, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to listen tonight. We would open up to any questions or comments.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments, Council? Let's see, Nady. Appreciate all the work you put together. It's a nice presentation. Enjoyed the video.
Thank you, everybody.
Is that one of your sirens going off? Did you time that perfectly or what?
I didn't have my phone.
It's like a flyover at an NFL stadium.
Does anyone on the council need a break? We've been going almost 2 hours. Need a break? We'll just take a real quick one, 5 minutes. I know we got people waiting here. Okay, coming back from our break. We're on item K. First reading of ordinance number 21-11, establishing the zoning designations of R1 Single Family Residential District, R2 Single Family Attached Residential District, and R3 Multifamily Residential District for the area of land to be known upon annexation as the Valley View 3rd Edition. And there's no action on this, just a first reading, but I'll ask the Public Works Director, City Engineer Heath Von Eye, to tell us about it.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. As you indicated, this is first reading, so no action tonight, but the subsequent second reading and the annexation action will be at the next council meeting. But for informational purposes here in the first meeting, this is a map of the general vicinity, the area that we're talking about. It's related to Valley View 3rd Edition, as highlighted in this black border. For context, 14th Avenue is right off the page down here, and 2nd Street Northwest is running north-south on the right-hand side of the page. Phase 1 is nearly completely built out, and Phase 2 has subsequently started construction of their improvements. And my understanding, the lot sales are progressing rather nicely for the developer, and so they're opening up into Phase 3. Of course, in order to do so, they need to commence with the appropriate annexation and zoning, and then the subsequent construction plan review and approval and platting of these lots. So we're in the annexation and zoning phase for Phase 3. One thing I'll note on here that Brandy has helped point out on this map, these two hashed areas are proposed to be zoned differently than what the approved preliminary plan shows. The approved prelim plan showed these as R1 zoning, and the zoning being presented that's been passed by the Planning Commission is having these two areas as R2 zoning. So that was worth pointing out. That is an anomaly from the approved preliminary plan. I would say from a staff standpoint, it wasn't significant enough to have concern, and the Planning Commission also agreed with that as well. Anytime there's a change like that from the prelim plan, there are some sensitivities that we as staff look at, which Brandy's done some research on. There is one existing residence in this location that Brandy did reach out to let them know that this area next to them is proposed to be zoned R2 and not R1. And they didn't have any concerns with the zoning, but did express some drainage issue and concerns that they posed that we made note of. So aside from that, this is in line with the approved preliminary plan and being recommended for approval as the zoning is presented here.
Okay, thank you. I have a question about this. It came up in a group discussion. I had coffee with the mayor recently. Some folks were asking about the park dedication, and I know that this subdivision did have a park dedication component. The trail, which has been there for years and years, kind of on the slope and got a little pond in there. That was part of the park dedication, but there was also a bike path component to it, which runs due north and south along the western boundary, I think. Can you verify that? Is that part of this? And if it is, when does that dedication occur? Or maybe it already has, I don't know. But I think that the development agreement, maybe on the first phase, included bringing up to within a few inches of the final grade or something. Do you remember that, Heath?
Not the specifics, I don't. Of course, pulling up the prelim plan here, it is noted, as you're describing, Mayor, a proposed pedestrian trail outlot A running along the westerly side of the subdivision. I would refer to Brandy if she knows any further details about the development agreement terms for that pedestrian trail.
Yeah, so what I'd like to know is it already dedicated with the first phase, adjacent to the first phase? And now are we getting some that will be included with the second phase? And when is it complete? Is it at the very last phase of development?
And do you have that information available, Brandy, online that's readily available, or something we could follow up with otherwise?
Yes. So Oh gosh, I'm hearing an echo. Anyways, I am pulling that plat up right now to see if that western area that was pegged for that recreational trail on the west side was platted. But I don't recall off the top of my head, and it is loading very slow. Yeah, it's not loading at all.
But
If
eventually
you-
there will be a
If you just
trail.
give me a moment, I will look into it and then hopefully have that information.
Okay, that's good enough. I know there was intended to be a trail that connects all the way through from 14th Avenue North into River Ridge. I don't remember how it ended up in River Ridge, probably through that road. And just wondering how much of it do we have already, and when will we get the rest?
Yeah, we can certainly look into that. I do see Representative of J&J Earthworks is here. If, Colin, if you have any information to provide to that timeline as far as you know from the development agreement?
Yes. Thank you, Heath. You are correct, Mayor, in saying that it is going to be brought up to within, I think it's 4 inches, if I remember correctly, of final grade, and then the Parks and Rec was going to finish it with surfacing.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as timeline, we did kind of have brief discussions last year on when that should be kind of done, completed. And the discussions we had is that we're not going to build only a portion of it. We're going to wait until this is now all annexed, and then we'll come in and put that berm in to that grade. And then eventually, within the 2-year development agreement, complete that.
So did the phasing of the bike path get any conversation with the plan commission or the council? I don't remember that it was going to wait until the entire subdivision was built out. Sometimes that takes decades. I mean, River Ridge started in '97 and it's not built out, so.
Correct, and that's why I was saying within the 2-year development agreement of
the
this
final
third,
phase?
yes.
Oh, the third phase.
It should be the third phase, or whenever I guess the Parks and Rec is ready to do that. If it's in the budget and they're ready for it, we'll go build the berm today if that's the. But
I did find that what Colin is saying is correct, that in Valley View First Edition, we did reserve 33 feet there on the west side on the plat. And then the development agreement does just say about bringing the grade within 6 inches, but not actually constructing the trail.
Okay, thank you.
So to confirm, Brandy, the grade should be brought up per phase. So the phase 1 berm should be established when the phase 1 improvements are accepted, and so on and so forth with phase 3?
Yep.
Okay.
And then obviously phase 2 didn't abut any of that area, so it's not included with phase 2.
Thank you for the clarity.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions, council, or comments? All right, I'm not seeing any. So we'll move on, thank you, to item L, which is first reading of ordinance number 21-12, a zoning text amendment to chapter 21.80, addressing city identification / welcome signs, number, dimensions, and locations of individual signs, and maximum total sign area by zoning district. And this is another first reading, no action, but I'll ask the Public Works Director, City Engineer Heath Von Eye to explain it, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. This is a zoning text amendment that helps to accomplish, primarily the main focus of it is helping to accomplish the installation or reconstruction of what I would call a gateway sign or a welcome to the city type of signage. This came to be through discussions the urban planner has been having with members of the community that have been working on seeing the primary sign we have now out by the interstate and Highway 212, seeing that upgraded and updated. And going through that process, we realized that our signing ordinance doesn't technically allow us to have a sign of the size and nature of what's in place there. So to reconstruct something of that magnitude at that location wouldn't even be feasible based on our current sign ordinance. So we simply wanted to add an addendum to the zoning ordinance that accounts for these gateway type signs to be an appropriate size so that they're visible to the people entering the community on our highways and gateways and entrances into the city. This shown here, the green text, is really the brunt of the amendment, where it calls out city identification and welcome signs and the regulations that would be related to them, making a maximum area of 2,000 square feet for those types of signs. Something that Brandy's worked closely on and has discussed with the Planning Commission, who has recommended approval at the last Planning Commission meeting.
That seems huge. 2,000 square feet for a sign.
Brandy, do you want to comment a little bit on the research you've done and how we derived at that number?
Yes, and so this was also put on hold. The subcommittee and I were working on this quite extensively last March, and then just with COVID happening, plans changed and that was put on hold. And so I'm not as up to date on the research that we did do, but I believe that the current sign, the Welcome to Watertown sign near the interstate along Highway 212 is 1,200 square feet. And so this was just really, and that was only measuring the actual like lettering themselves. Like, it wasn't including the landscaping behind it. Obviously you wouldn't necessarily, but just the letters itself were, I believe, 1,200 square feet. And I can confirm that too before the second reading.
Okay, I just Googled it, and a typical billboard is 14 by 48. This would be 10 by 200.
Yeah, and it has a lot to do with, I mean, the setback of it, and then obviously wanting it to be a statement piece that is cohesive throughout the gateways to the community.
Right.
And it would be something that would have to be approved by city council, being that it would be going on municipally owned property. So it would be something that would not be egregious and that would look nice.
Sure. Right. It's not a commercial message, so it's like art, or intended to get attention and welcome people. So any questions or comments from the council? No questions. Well, thank you, Brandy and Heath.
Yep, thank you.
Item M is introduction of Watertown Development Company, WDC, Executive Director Mark Vox, and authorization for Watertown Development Company to sign an application for a local infrastructure improvement project grant for a housing project. And I will invite Michelle Kakachek and Mark Vox up to the podium. And Mark hasn't really started yet, but I'll let Michelle introduce him and explain what's going on.
Yes, we have with us Mark Vox, who is our new executive director for the Watertown Development Company. And I'll just turn it over to Mark, and he can tell you a little bit about himself, and he'll be starting with us next week.
Great. Mark Vox, Honorable Mayor, members of the council, pleasure to be here and get reacquainted with some of you and meet others, and look forward to working with you. You've done a fabulous job of building momentum and having Watertown be the place to be in South Dakota, and I'm really excited to join the community. My wife and I will be relocating, so if you know of a house for sale, please reach out. We're looking for one. I've been in economic development for 17 years. Way back when, I was in law enforcement for 7 years in Aberdeen, then did some fundraising for the Catholic school system. Was Congressman Thune's area director, Northeast area director, when he was in the House of Representatives. So I spent a lot of time since 1996 in Watertown. Did a long stint with GOED, again representing Northeast South Dakota. Went to Fargo for a period of time, most recently in Mitchell. So that's enough about me, but I really look forward to working with all of you and again, continuing the momentum that you have built here.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you or get reacquainted, and we're looking forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming before you've even started. We appreciate that. And I need to get a motion on the second part of the item before Michelle tells us about it. So, okay, I got a motion from Y and a second by Holene. Okay, Michelle, now you can.
So what we are just kind of looking at today, and I don't know on that motion, it has that for the WDC to sign it. We wouldn't actually need council approval if we were to sign it. If the application that we're thinking of doing for a local infrastructure improvement grant, if we did it in the name of the city, then that would need the mayor's approval to sign it. What we're looking at doing is, this is a program through the state that does provide some infrastructure funds up to $500,000. And generally, it's been used for more industrial projects because the burden on the return is job creation and retention. However, we feel that with this housing development that we're kind of looking at, we had a developer bring it to us, is more of a starter home type development. There's generally not as much appetite for that. So we thought, well, why not try to pursue this grant so that we can take down the burden of some of those costs and keep those homes affordable. We would approach it from more of a job retention standpoint by taking a look at what we have as far as our labor force as opposed to what our openings are, because having housing at that level is something that is important to do that. I know we'll be hearing more, the council will be hearing more about this particular project in the coming weeks, but what this would do is this would help keep our costs down and bring the ask down a little bit that we would bring to the council, or that the developer would bring to the council. So again, it's a stretch, you know, it's something where we've put out the feelers, and you know, the state has said generally not, but we can maybe take a look at it. But we're still waiting to see if we could actually, if they'll allow us to apply or not, and if they would, we're on a time crunch because the next round is due April 30th.
Oh, yeah.
But I've done applications in shorter time frames, but and we would be working with First District on that to submit that.
Okay, very good. And this would give Mark the authorization to sign on behalf of something with the city's name on it?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we don't have to meet again and do that?
Yep.
And there's no obligation, right? It's a, if we get the grant, then that would come forward for a project?
Yes, yes, it would, and it would just pull down some of those project costs. We've done these grants before for a couple different projects. One was done for the Terex project, and I believe that one was in the city's name. Most recently, we did, the WDC did get approved for one for the municipal utilities gas tap project, and then that went through to them to defray the cost that was the municipal utilities responsibility of that project. So then it covered half of that. So that's what we're hoping to do. But again, it's just on, you know, when they're looking at the returns and how they measure the worthiness of the application. We're trying to go for that job retention rather than creation, because it's not actually going to create new jobs, but it will help us fill the ones we have.
Right.
And recruit more workforce. So.
Retention too, yep. Okay. Any questions, council, or comments? Not seeing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item N is Tax Increment Financing District number 14, which is Stony Point. Number one, approval of resolution number 21-18, adopting the boundaries and approving the project plan for tax increment district number 14 within the city of Watertown, South Dakota. And I'll get a motion for that. You got a motion by Helene? Second by Bueller. And I'll ask the city attorney, Matt Roby, to explain this to us.
Thank you, Mayor. To answer your question, no, this is not having deja vu. You did see this TIF once before and approve the development agreement once before. What happened here is there was just a slight error in the legal description. And when we sent it into the state, they identified that as a more than just a grammatical typo that could be fixed. It needed to go back through the process because it identified a different section of land. So we went back through the process with the Plan Commission. Incidentally, though, it may have been a bit fortuitous because, as most folks know, the Stony Point project has suffered some increased costs because of this general cost of materials right now. And so because we were going back through the process, what we did was added a 10% contingency amount into the eligible project costs. And so it's still well below the anticipated TIF increment revenue, but it is an additional amount that is added to the previously approved amount to account for the increased project costs.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Council? Councilman Villar?
Two questions on the project cost. One is a contingency normally an eligible project cost? I'm just asking totally out of ignorance, because I went back and I looked at the Runes TIF. There was nothing for a contingency in there. So is that something that is allowable or is normally done?
I don't believe we've done it in other instances, but in my opinion, it is an allowable project cost.
Okay. Secondly, then I'm not sure why I did, but I went back and looked at the agenda packet when we approved this back in September last year, and the figure of $3,962,237 that's referenced in the background information, it was significantly. That's presented as being the previous total cost. Okay, the agenda pack had a figure significantly less than it was $3,679,837. So did those numbers change, or was I guess I'm trying to reconcile where the number from the previous agenda packet, how that rolls forward into this. If someone could explain that.
Yeah, I can certainly. So I didn't want to. I didn't bring that up so as not to confuse the issue, but that was an additional tweak that was made. So long story here short, the number that was in the previous TIF plan, all the numbers were correct, but the bottom line number somehow didn't add up to all the correct numbers.
And I agree with that. I noticed that as well.
Okay. So that's what happened, and then I carried forward the incorrect number,
Okay.
and so it was just an incorrect addition. All the numbers were correct, and we didn't expect you'd have so much free time in your retirement.
Whoa.
Okay, well, question answered. Thank you.
You got quite a reputation, Glenn. I do have just a statement or whatever. I don't think that we pick these estimated costs apart. Like, we don't take it line by line, and they've got concrete reinforcing, $65,000. And if it came out as $82,000 instead of $65,000, we're not capped at $65,000 for that single line item. It's the total that we're looking at, right? We don't, is that correct, Matt? We're not looking on line by line. It's just to illustrate how we arrived at that total. but
That's correct. Communities could, if the city was funding this out of our tax dollars, for example, we could dig into the weeds and ask for invoices on every line item, comparing line items of project cost. But in this case particularly, it's what we call as a pay-as-you-go or self-finance TIF. So, and historically, all 3 years I've been here, we have not dug into the project costs. Actually, a lot of the TIFs we've approved have been approved as economic development grants, which is now allowed under statute, but we still list the eligible project costs just in the interest of transparency. But technically, TIFs, there's a category now of tax increment financing that it can just be an economic development grant, which you just lay out a dollar amount, give the grant, and go from there.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'll take action on item 1. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. And then part 2 is authorization for the mayor to sign the development agreement between the City of Watertown and Stony Point Investment LLP for tax increment district number 14. I have a motion by Albertson and a second by Helene. And Matt, I'll let you tell us about this one again, please.
So this just is the development agreement that memorializes, puts into a concrete agreement that gets filed with the Register of Deeds, the responsibilities and obligations of the city and the developer. It essentially just says that we're going to pay out the increment as it comes in.
Right, and there's no obligation on the city's part to use any of the city's money. It's all the TIF revenue, right?
Correct.
So no,
yeah,
no obligation.
we're just, our liability is only to pass through what we receive. There's no liability to pay out any certain amount in any year. We pass through the amount we receive up until that dollar amount that was approved. And then the TIF ends at the earlier of that dollar amount being reached or 20 years.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, council members? Doesn't look like it. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item O is approval of development agreement for tax increment financing district number 16, which is the ruins. And I'll ask the city attorney, Matt Roby, to tell us about this one.
Thank you, Mayor. On March 1st, the council approved the tax increment financing district plan for TIF District 16, but we did not have a development agreement at that time. I was waiting on just waiting to make sure we didn't have to come back and make an amendment to the development agreement if the financing situation changed. So what you have in front of you is just, again, a memorialization of that TIF, our obligation to pay through to the developer. But in this case, the developer's payments are assigned to the Watertown Development Company as well as Red River Bank. So the Watertown Development Company is financing the TIF for the developer, and they have obtained financing for what they provided the developer through Red River Bank. So the first Red River State Bank, the first $580,000 that the TIF generates will be paid out directly to Red River State Bank. And then after that, the remaining amount will be paid out to the Watertown Development Company.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments, council? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries, and for the record, Councilman Holeen abstained. He stepped away. Okay, and that is it for those items, but we have the ones that I moved from the consent agenda. So we'll start with item 4H, which was approval for the street division and park, rec, and forestry department to purchase a total of 4 new unused dump trucks from Sanitation Products, Inc. in Sioux Falls, South Dakota via Sourcewell bid. And I see we have the street superintendent in the room, and we have the park director online, I believe. Rob, since you're sitting there, I'll ask you to tell us about it.
Okay. What this is we were budgeted to get 3 different trucks for the street department, and Park and Rec was budgeted to get 1 truck. And we worked together to, basically it saved us some time, and I helped Park and Rec out on equipment, you know, the type of things they need for themselves on the work they do. And then, of course, we went through Sanitation Products for all this through Sourcewell bids. So the total of all the trucks comes to about $574,202. And as far as what we would be getting at the street facility would be 1 tandem axle truck with no plow or sander. It's just strictly for hauling material. And that comes in at $131,271. And then we would be getting 2 single axle trucks with plow, sanders, brine system, loaded down to do the plowing that we need to do with them. And those would come in at $343,294. And then Park and Rec's truck would be a single axle truck, just for hauling. You know, they're not going to be doing anything special in the winter or anything with it unless they're cutting trees. But mainly 4 trees they'll be using that for, and that came in just under their budget at $99,637, and I think they were budgeted at $100,000. So,
okay.
Is there any questions?
Thank you. That was Rob Bainan, the street superintendent. And go ahead, Councilman Rademski.
Are all these Freightliners?
They are. They're all Freightliners. Actually, 2 of them will be SD 108s and 2 of them will be M2s.
Okay, now have you checked with Sourcewell on this about the issues Freightliner has recently had with their chassis?
I haven't. I'm not aware of it.
Well, let's look into that because we were notified at my place of employment that they have totally shut their factory down for 3 months to look into this issue.
Okay, I was not aware of it. Our vendor said nothing about it. I did, they are having issues with some computer chips. It's kind of the same thing in the automotive industry, that some of these plants have shut down due to that, but I wasn't aware of any frame issues.
Yeah, let's just double check on that to make sure everything's on the up and up with it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councilman Rademski. Anyone else? The Parks Director, Terry Kelly, did you have any comments that you wanted to add?
No, Mayor. Spoke with Rob before the meeting, and he had it covered. So thank him for presenting. But short of Councilman Rademski's comment, we'll definitely look into that as well. But no, it's within our budget. Barely snuck in, but thank you, Rob, for presenting.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. Did I get a motion? Okay. That's why I didn't write down names. I need a motion and a second. A motion by Vilhauer and a second by Albertson. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, item I is approval for the street division to purchase 1 new unused Kubota M5 tractor for $52,916.63 from Eastside Implement via Sourcewell bid. Have a motion by Y and a second by Holeen, and I will just ask the street superintendent, Rob Bainan, to tell us about it, please.
This is basically to replace one of our old tractors. It's a 1994 Ford. The tractor we're looking at replacing it with will have front wheel assist, which we currently don't have. It'll have a sealed enclosed cab, which will have heat and air. We'll be using that tractor for more things than we were previously using the last one, which would, in the spring of the year, our alleys in town get quite soft and we have issues. We can't run the heavy motor grader down those. So a lot of times we pull a box scraper through the alleys to help fill the holes in and stuff until it gets firmed up enough to run a motor grader down. And currently we do that with one of our open cab John Deeres and sometimes this Ford. But that's what this tractor would be replacing, as a Ford for doing that, plus mowing ditches and stuff like that with a Batwing. So, and we're budgeted, actually, I made an error in our financial impact. You'll see on your council packet, it shows $52,916.63 for the budget amount. That's incorrect. It's actually $61,352.35. So there is a sufficient amount of funds left to cover this purchase.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. Any questions, council? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item K is consideration of approval and award for the Cattail Crossing Golf Course Greens replacement bid to the low bidder of Dunick Inc. for the total bid amount of $377,500, and to authorize the mayor to sign all applicable documents.
So moved.
I have a motion by Albertson, second by Vilhauer, and I will ask the Director of Parks, Rec, and Forestry, Terry Kelly, to explain it to us, please.
Yep, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As the mayor stated, what's before you is the bid we opened on April 13th for the golf greens replacement project. If you recall, we did take bids on this in early 2020, and they were over budget, and we felt the bids were a little high, so the council did reject those. We went back and budgeted further dollars, and again went to bid on the 13th, and we are recommending to accept a low bidder, Dunick, for $377,500, which includes 4 alternates, 1 add, and 3 deducts. And I'm open to questions anybody may have.
All right, thank you. Any questions, council? Councilman Albertson?
Terry, when would you start this project and when is it going to be finished?
We have a start date of July 26th on or before, and we want to do that because we need a 12-week grow-in, and that would put us about mid-June 2022 operational and opening. We basically need 12 weeks of good growing weather, so we hope to hit about half of that in 21 and then hit the other half, early spring, early summer, or late spring, early summer next year. So, and we do have a plan for those of you on the council, anybody listening. Part of these is 8, 9. We do have some big events out there. Our plan is to reroute the red course instead of with red 8 being closed. We'd actually play blue 8 and blue 9, so we would still have an 18-hole championship course throughout the season. So, but yeah, late July 26th start date and mid-June, weather permitting.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
I just got a message from the finance officer. I don't think I got a motion on item, which one? Kristen, can you tune in and tell me what I'm missing?
Yeah, we get a motion on the TIF 16? Chris and I, neither one of us had it marked that there was a motion.
Well, I don't have it marked either, so, and I didn't cross it off. Did we vote? We did vote. All right, I need a motion and a second for TIF 16 development agreement, which is the ruins. It was Bueller. And second by Radomski. Any discussion about that? See none, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Kristen. I must be getting tired. Okay, that is it for our items. We have Resolution 20-15, which is the emergency resolution for the COVID pandemic, which we usually discuss at every meeting, and if seeing if anybody wants to make a change. Basically, that says that we'll ask people to follow the CDC guidelines. Any council member input on that? Seeing none, we'll go on to old business, other old business. Anyone? Councilman Helene was asking if I wanted to talk about the airport, and I will say, I think it probably is worthwhile to say that there was an order awarding the Essential Air Service contract to Key Lime Air, and the city had recommended SkyWest. We've had such great success and wonderful service from SkyWest. We want to continue with that, but that's not how it went. So we've been having some meetings, and we're hoping to get to the bottom of it. We're a little bit concerned about the Key Lime bid that was awarded. So we're working on that if anybody is concerned. Thank you. Is there any other old business? All right, is there any new business? Councilman Helene?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a request to make that I don't think will require official action, but one that I hope the council and the mayor will be open to nonetheless. As everyone knows, our Human Resources Director, Jillian Pifley, tendered her resignation. We are sad to see her go, but we wish her the best. In the meantime, that leaves us with a void in an absolutely vital position in City Hall, perhaps one of the most vital. And the timing of this is one that I have this request to make. Applications for the HR director will close on May 3rd. That also happens to be the date that we will hopefully have a new city manager chosen, offer him or her the job, and hopefully get a response back from them in the affirmative. My request is, since the incoming city manager will be working so closely with the human resources director, I would like to make the request, given your approval, that that if we have a city manager in place that has taken our job offer, that we allow the city manager to at least sit in, listen to the interview process, and possibly ask a couple questions, and then maybe at the end of it, depending on timing, offer his or her suggestion to the council. Hopefully the mayor and the city manager will agree on the candidate that they want to hire, but I think that it would be good to offer the city manager that input, since it will be such an important issue or a position. And I just wanted to raise that up.
I have no problem with that. I think it's a good idea. Of course, we don't know who it is, and we don't know if they'll be available.
There are some issues to it, but
Right.
I would say, to the best that we can, let's make it possible for the city manager proposed.
If they're willing.
Yes.
Right, I have no problem with that, Councilman Helene. Anyone else have any new business?
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Just a quick announcement, 10th Avenue North construction began this morning. The removals on Phase 1, which is on the west half of the project. If you recall, those asphalt pavement removals have begun today. So all the traffic control is up. Just advise the neighborhoods and citizens to, follow those detour routes and such that are posted.
Is the frost out?
I believe for the most part, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right, any other new business? Any liaison member reports? Councilman Roby.
Just public service announcement. This Saturday, there's going to be a river cleanup. They're going to meet at Lions Park at 9 a.m. Again, this Saturday, Lions Park at 9 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's sponsoring that?
I'm not sure the sponsor, but Lee Schoenbeck is kind of leading the charge, Senator Schoenbeck.
That's very nice. Thank you. Any other announcements? All right, there is no reason for us to go into executive session pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2, and there being no further business, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.